All right.
Uh,
I am here with Steve. Steve
Hello.
must be otaku, a Twitch streamer extraordinaire who streamed
What's up, champions?
Gigantic.
I did for a little bit. Yep. I'm
Um,
here.
would you like to share what involvement you had with Gigantic at the time that it was alive and the community around it?
Yeah, sure. I found the game in late 2016. It was near Christmas. I've been playing. I think my buddy actually showed me the game, and I downloaded it as a demo just to play something. Got really into it and started streaming it nonstop. And then I got really focused with the community. I think it was maybe the middle of 2017 that I got not really, I don't know if signed on was the term, but I started streaming on Go Gigantic, the main like community channel for Gigantic. Um, and I streamed on that for a while. It was a lot of fun interacting with the community, the main community of the game. And then up until the end of the game, that was like my main go-to game to stream was Gigantic. I would stream it like I would say every day, every other day. Um, so yeah, that was my main involvement. It was just nothing but streaming and just played it constantly.
Hell yeah. Do you
Yeah.
still stream to this day?
On and off, not so much anymore. I started to definitely stop streaming as much after Gigantic died.
Same, yeah.
I would say, what was it, back in 2018 when the game, sort of fell off.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I started to slow down and started to focus on myself more. But in terms of streaming, yeah, I stream maybe like once a week, once every twice a week. It's not as much as before, that's for sure.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, nice. Okay, so what do you think were some concepts about Gigantic um, that it presented that made it so unique at the time and possibly even unique to this day?
I think back in the day when it was so popular, I think the most relevant comment that cemented with everybody was the art style. It was so different compared to everything else. I think the cell shaded art style bode well with a lot of people. So I think a lot of comparisons came up with Legend of Zelda, Wind Waker. There were a lot of comparisons there. So I think my main thing was the art style was awesome. It's cool to look at, and the overall gameplay of it was a lot of fun. I didn't think the maps were too big. I didn't think they were too small. The overall structure and how the games worked, it made sense to me. It was just overall a fun game to play back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when a game is just good to look at, it makes it so
hmm
much more enjoyable.
It does, yeah, yeah, it really does. I think the art style is what kept me, the gameplay style of the entire thing. It stuck with me, made me not want to stop playing it. So the art style was definitely huge, and just overall the community itself was were composed of really, friendly and just nice people overall that I,
Mm,
still miss to this day, and miss the conversations that I had with them that I only had back then, and I haven't really talked to them since then. So I think, yeah, the art and the community was a big driving force into why the game was something I wanted to play every day.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on the flip side, I guess, in your opinion, what do you think were
hmm
like the biggest issues with Gigantic? Why do you think that it declined so heavily, and why do you think it
hmm
failed?
Yeah, I got this question a lot. I think in the year that I kept streaming from 2018 to 2019, I heard that almost every single day. And people asking my opinion on the whole ideal and like why it didn't work out, what happened. And I guess the biggest issue was that it was on the latter end of MOBAs being popular. It's kind of like battle royales. Like battle royales, like they're still kind of a thing, but just they're not as popular as they once were,
Hmm.
in my opinion. I think MOBAs and Gigantic came out in a stage where MOBAs were starting to die off. They were going from their peak and they were falling, and I think that's kind of like what happened. The genre just wasn't really there anymore.
Right.
And not saying that Gigantic didn't have the content to keep going, but I think because it wasn't there wasn't enough. Maybe there wasn't enough there. Maybe there wasn't enough content. That it just kind of fell off. But I think people go from one game to another pretty quickly now. Um, and I think because of just that reason of switching games so frequently, um, that it just kind of fell through pretty fast. There wasn't enough updates quick enough. People got bored of it. Another reason could have been that the scaling was off. There were too many experienced players playing, and then the beginners kept getting screwed over.
Mm.
So there fell through any chance of any new people wanting to play the game because they were getting screwed by Smurfs or they were getting out leveled by people. So that might be another thing too. I think there's just so many factors that could have came into play. I think if Motiga had a bigger dev team, if it was on the same scale of like Blizzard, it probably could have competed against like Paladins. It could have competed against Overwatch. But I think since maybe the dev team wasn't the size of Hi-Rez or Blizzard, that might be the reason why it just fell through. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, there's lots of reasons, but that is
for
actually
sure.
an interesting one that I didn't think too much about until having these
Mhm.
conversations. Is SoFetch brought up that PUBG came out shortly after the MOBA train was starting to die,
Oh
and
yeah, that is true.
my God, PUBG was
It was huge back then, man.
huge. I mean,
Yeah, it started everything.
Fortnite is
PUBG, then
obviously
Fortnite.
the battle royale we think of, but like
Mhm.
PUBG did it first, and it just destroyed every game in its path.
It did,
So
yeah. There was a huge following with that game, and I mean, I could see why. Like, for what it was a really fun game to play, but it was also, in the same sense, it was kind of, in its early stages, it was very jank.
oh
It's
yeah.
kind of like Daisy when it first came out. Like, if you didn't have like a top tier computer, it just ran awful.
Yeah.
It was super jank, had low FPS on everything. But it's kind of crazy that a game like that in its very early stages can do so well. And I think it's just the popularity of it and just something that we haven't, I don't want to say we haven't seen a game like that in a while, but just it was the brink of like a new stage for battle royales that started it all, PUBG and then Fortnite and then Apex.
Mhm.
So I think, yeah, I think MOBAs, they began to fall off and then the rise of the battle royale started to hit. And I think that's kind of like the beginning stages of why the game sort of fell off. So,
Yeah, that kind
yeah.
of happens with like multiplayer trends, like multiplayer game
Yeah,
genre trends. Is like
for sure.
even though like Gigantic wasn't the only game to die off. Like if you weren't a solidified MOBA like League or Dota, the pretty
Yeah.
much those two, or
Yeah.
Smite, I guess Smite is there too.
Mhm.
Then you just kind of crumbled because there's not enough room for more than a couple.
Yeah, it's kind of like MMOs. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same sense. Like, I mean, you have like World of Warcraft and you have all these other MOBAs that are like leading like Guild Wars and Final Fantasy 14. They are the juggernauts and it's hard to compete against someone who's been in that field for so long and have a huge community base. Like, how do you take away from their community to go onto this new game? And I think that was a struggle for Gigantic because they were new into the MOBA realm and they never really got that big of, I guess maybe on launch they got a pretty quick community there for a little bit
Hmm.
because I was there on launch day, but it seems like they came and went. They showed up for the game for like a month and then they died off really fast.
Yeah.
And that was kind of saddening. So,
Yeah, I think something that was kind of interesting was like I played a little bit before launch. Like I was
mhm.
late to the betas and stuff. My
Yeah.
buddy got me into it, and then I remember when it launched, they had all these streamers playing it, all these really popular Twitch streamers
Right.
that had like 10, 15K viewers at the time.
Oh yeah. I
And it
remember
was
them.
like, holy shit, this game's exploding. And then
Mhm.
suddenly it's like, okay, well, nobody seemed to follow follow along.
I I'm gonna be honest. I still wonder about that. It was a very weird time, and I still remember that day like it was yesterday because on that day when it first released, what was that in the summer of 2017? I'm trying to. It was somewhere around in there, I
When
think.
it full released on Steam,
Yeah.
That had to be summer of 2017, July, I think.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Okay. So that was a weird time because I remember streaming that on launch day, and I think I was very early into streaming on the launch day, and then everybody hopped on, but I think Lyric and a bunch of other like big streamers were
Hmm.
playing it. But I had I think the largest numbers I've ever seen on my channel, and it was like 600 people watching at one
Oh
time,
wow.
which was weird, but no one was really saying anything. Like it felt like my usual amount of people in my chat, but wasn't anybody talking in my channel. I don't want to say it was bots. It felt like bots.
I mean, at that time in 2017, I guess it could have been,
I
but
guess it could have been, yeah. But it definitely didn't feel like I had like the amount of people that were showing on the numbers, on the viewers, and it was so surreal at the time. I think I gained like 1,000 followers at one time that day.
wow.
Um, but yeah, that was something. I remember launch day like it was yesterday, and it was such a fun time. But yeah, good times.
Yeah,
I wish I could go back then,
I know.
6 years ago.
Right. Um, well, in your opinion, I guess, what do you
Hmm.
think the developers could have prioritized at the time? Like, if they weren't, like, just in a hypothetical, if they didn't get screwed over by the comparisons to like other games, or the
Oh yeah,
dying genre,
right.
or financial issues, or any of that, what do you think they could have prioritized on the game itself to make it more, I don't know, out there?
Uh, yeah, that's tough. I think, man, that's really tough. I think maybe pushing more consistent updates might have helped. I
Yeah.
think the updates at the time after release, they felt really
I think it
slow.
was like 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, and I think the biggest update, I remember on launch date, there were a lot of exploits on getting outside of the map that were
Mm,
really jank, and there were some hot fixes like next day patches on that type of stuff. But in terms of like actual content, it felt so delayed. So I think maybe, yeah, probably the amount of content, maybe either pushing more characters out or more maps, just more things in general. I think that would have helped out. I think after release, it just felt like it was stagnant and it wasn't moving anywhere, and people thought that it was moving too slow and nothing else was, things weren't changing enough for them, and maybe that's why they flipped the switch and went back to whatever else they were playing.
mm.
So, yeah, I guess more content consistently is the only thing that I can really think of that would have helped back then.
What do you think about, like, I think a lot of people shared the sentiment that the game was too difficult to understand, the game mode specifically.
Oh yeah, I did get that. Yeah, I did get that a lot whenever I was first streaming it. People
Right.
weren't really understanding it. Um,
Even though I didn't have a lot of viewers on Twitch, like pretty
yeah,
much anyone who would come in would be like, "How the fuck do creatures work? What is my stamina bar? What's focus?" You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
I always thought that maybe a more basic, like, arena based PvP mode would have really helped out a lot. Something where people can just go in and learn the system mechanics and not have to play the full MOBA game mode.
Right, and I think that it probably. I don't know if different modes would have helped. I think that. I think maybe the different things that you could spawn on different points was confusing for people. Um, I think, man, it's been so long since I played. It's hard to even remember what things you could spawn. That sounds terrible, but I haven't played the game in so long. I haven't played it in what 5 years.
Yeah. Well,
I
I mean, yeah, there are the different creatures, right? And they all did different things.
Yeah,
So even as somebody who had for a little bit played on a competitive team, sometimes it
right,
was still pretty confusing. Like, do I put a dragon here? Do I put a bloomer? Do I put a cyclops? Do I put a Cerberus? Like,
right,
they all have their powers specifically, and sometimes it was obvious where to put
right.
them. But like, I think that was another detriment to newer
I,
players joining, was like, people would be like, why the fuck did you put this creature there,
I'm getting
idiot?
PTSD right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you'd be like, I
yeah.
don't know what I'm doing.
As someone who mostly played solo and I went in with randoms a lot and never really played with other people whenever I streamed, it was kind of a hindrance whenever someone would put down something that you didn't want.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the variety of creatures, which don't get me wrong, it made it unique for the game itself and the game mode. But I think that was another thing that was confusing. It didn't make sense to players on what they needed to put down.
Mm.
So I think for a lot of the beginner people, like just starting, I they were confused by it, and maybe that's another reason why they didn't stick with it,
Yeah.
was because it wasn't clear to them. Not saying like the tutorial was bad or anything, but maybe a more in-depth tutorial would have helped for beginner players.
It's okay. You can say it. The tutorial was kind of bad.
It was kind of bad. Yeah. It wasn't great, and I
Yeah.
think they finally changed it up. What, on launch they had a different tutorial. It's been so long.
Yeah, yeah.
And that one was definitely a bit better than the beta one.
Right.
But yeah, I guess maybe like I guess the creatures, it didn't make much sense to a lot of people. And not saying, we should just have like a boring game mode where we're just killing each other in like this dome area or, typical map. I think that would have made it even less interesting and it would have died off even faster. But I don't know. I think maybe things weren't as clear for a lot of people who got into the game, and maybe that's why they just weren't as interested. So
That
yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you think that if it came back at any
Mhm.
point, if Daddy Gearbox was like, "Hey, we got a development team and we're bringing it back. We got some funding, and we're gonna put out some updates for it and clean it up and release it back on Steam," do you think you'd play it?
You know what? It's really tough. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would probably play it in the beginning, but I'll be honest, I really thought Battleborn was more interesting than Gigantic,
Oh
and
wow,
I would see Gearbox making Battleborn and, reimagining that more than Gigantic.
wow,
That sounds
yeah.
terrible, but
No, that's just an opinion. That's interesting though.
I like the characters more, and I
Yeah.
think the game modes for Battleborn, they made more sense to me. I would probably play Battleborn over Paladins, over Smite, over all these other MOBAs, over Overwatch. I wish the game would come back. I mean, everybody who's coming to my channel randomly and be like, "Hey, you're that one streamer I used to watch back in the day, like 5, 6 years ago." They've wanted the game to come back, but I don't know. They would have to do so much in order to bring that game back. They would have to release so much more new content. They would have to completely redo so many things
Mm-hmm.
in order for it to be popular, to gain traction. And I don't know if Gearbox would want to take the chance on something like that.
Right.
I would love for it to happen, but I think maybe at this point in time, I think it might be good for it to just do its own thing, lay dormant, and then maybe down the line, years and years from now, maybe it'll make a comeback. But I think more than likely it's going to be put into the cemetery, and I don't think it'll come back, honestly.
You know, that's a
Yeah.
very honest and real take, and I respect it.
Yeah, I mean, it's honest, but it's just one of those things when you're a streamer and you, like, after the game died and you hear that constantly, you hear that question pop
Yeah,
into your
yeah.
head, and you get that hope. But from a realistic point of view, since I'm a realistic person, I really don't foresee it ever making a return. Even though I would love to play characters such as HK and Sven again, because they were
Mm-hmm.
so much fun to play. I don't see it making a comeback, unfortunately.
Yeah, as somebody who is more optimistic, I still do feel that way because I think one of the biggest hurdles that they'd have to, I mean, the biggest hurdle is getting a development team on board, which
Exactly.
who knows if
Yeah.
Gearbox would want to do that, but then also the big thing, which, I'm not a game designer, so it's hard for me to understand exactly how this works, but the
Right.
game was built on Unreal Engine 3.
Hmm.
Um, and now we have Unreal Engine 5. So it's quite old, the engine.
I want some realistic cell shading, man. That would be awesome. I want to
Yeah,
see Unreal Engine 5 and cell shaded Gigantic. That'd be sick.
I know. But like
Yeah.
if they did bring it back, the question would be, would they keep it on the old engine and just update it from there, or would they rebuild the entire thing? So it's
Mm,
kind of like a lose lose in my opinion,
yeah.
which makes it kind of obvious that it's probably not going to make a comeback. But we can always dream.
Yeah, I mean, unless there was like a big petition of people in the community to make a comeback, and that would
Yeah,
have to be a rather large petition. I don't think it would come
right.
back. Yeah.
Um, so you were a streamer of the game. You played it a lot. You played with a
Yeah.
lot of people. But did you
Mm.
ever play competitively?
I did once. I played with Lullaroos, I played with Lizard Wizard and Evil Drawing, and we had a team called the Dick Sharks. And we played that competitively. And I remember, oh man, Zatori and what was it, Light of Hope? I believe
Wow.
that's yeah.
I haven't heard all those names in so long.
It's been a while, yeah. I played. It's been so long. I'm trying to remember when that whole competitive scene happened. It must have been like right at launch or a couple months after launch. I think we did that. So we created this team kind of like out of nowhere, and I came up with this kind of like BS name of like Dick Sharks, and the original idea of it was something similar to my community. We had like these like milk shark sort of like redeem thing in my community.
Mm.
Um, but I also wanted Zatori to constantly say Dick Sharks whenever he was shoutcasting it, just because it would bring me so much joy just hearing him say that in Light of Hope. So I had to create a name that would be fun and interesting. So that's the name that we decided on. We weren't obviously that amazing at the game. I think we maybe did two. We got through like two teams or one team. I forget how far we got into it, but it wasn't that far. Like I streamed it. I was somewhat decent at it, but not on the same level as a lot of other people. A
Yeah.
lot of the sweaty Woo players I couldn't
Oh
handle,
yeah.
man.
Hey,
Yeah.
I was a sweaty woo player, and I still wasn't as good as the other
Yeah.
sweaty woos.
They can do some insane stuff, man.
I
I
know.
just can't. But yeah, I was in the competitive scene for just a little bit, but it wasn't like that wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
There were definitely people that I was friends with who were really into it, but I never got super into it.
Well, if the game had a decent player base, do you think that it could have been pushed like pretty far competitively if there were
Uh
the numbers for it? Like people could, really take the game far with its mechanics.
I I mm, I want to say yes, but I feel like I don't think so. No.
Hmm.
I want to say yes, but no, I don't think so. For what it is, I think it's I don't know if it has enough going for it as the base game right now. If there was more to it, then maybe. But I think if you look at other games, they're not really in the same field. But like Splitgate got super hyped, ton of money funneled into it. There was a huge like competitive scene there for a little bit, and then it died off super fast. Like even with millions and millions of dollars into a game, like it can still die off like the competitive scene.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it would take a lot for Gigantic to even be on that same level to to have like a decent scene to it. I don't even know what it would even take to be on that same level as other competitors, but realistically, they would have to like change up so much stuff and put more content out there for it to be really worthwhile to watch. And don't get me wrong, like I loved watching the competitive scene. It was fun to watch, sit back and watch back in the day. But in order to gain the traction, the amount of volume that it needs, I don't know what it would take. But
Yeah.
I don't think it would do well, even if it came back. I don't think, or even back then, back in the day, we tried, or I guess the community tried to push community stuff constantly, a competitive scene. Um, and even then it really didn't hit well with the Twitch community. Like there were people watching, but it wasn't like a ton of people. So yeah, I don't think it would I don't think it would go that far.
Hmm.
So
What
yeah.
about on like a mechanical level? Like, do you think the game has enough interesting mechanics and enough depth to be at a competitive level?
Mm, I, from a mechanical standpoint, I think it does. I think it is interesting having like the different creatures and having the different points on all the maps that were available at the time of launch. I think from a mechanical standpoint, I think it could it could push the envelope there. I think it could be interesting. Um, but I feel like there needs to be more variety, whether it's from maps or different creatures or different characters.
Hmm.
I think the game mode itself, the main game mode of Gigantic, it makes sense on a competitive level, but I don't know if the scale of it is there yet.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
All right. Well, what about characters? Do you, by chance, have a favorite and least favorite character?
Yeah, I mean the main ones that I used back in the day, I always used HK and Uncle Sven. Those were I really wish I could look to see how many hours I poured into those
Hmm.
characters, but it had to be in like the thousands.
Wow.
Um, so Sven definitely. He was just so much fun to use, and normally don't like support characters, but he was such a blast to use, such a fun character, and so unique. And then for HK, I just liked using his railgun and just doming people from across the map.
Yeah.
That was a blast. So those are definitely my favorites. I definitely played other characters, but I strayed away from the assassin characters because I wasn't that type of player. So you never saw me on Trip, you never saw me on Woo. I didn't like them, and I think I didn't like them because they kept killing me on my favorite characters, and I hated them. So those are my least favorites. So Trip and Woo, the assassin characters, because they were always the one to kill me. Like
Yeah.
that, and maybe Gnosis whenever he was broken before the final update of the game.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I would say those are my favorite and least favorite. Yeah.
Cool. Well, you kind of answered this before a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
was there anything that you thought was unique about the community? Could you share a little bit of like what your experience was and like what made the community special?
It was a mix of people are just around the world, and I think I say that because the community was rather small and it felt like a mix of people from around the world, but it really was. It was
Hmm.
very nice people. It was some of the nicest people that got me through a lot of hard times back in the day. So if it wasn't for their kindness and interaction while I was streaming, I don't know where I would be. So they put me in a really positive space, and I definitely thank them for just for hanging out with me and dealing with my craziness and weirdness. Because I definitely felt like the oddball whenever I would stream on
Mm,
the in the gigantic category. Um, but yeah, they were very very friendly people, and I definitely have high regards for all of them. So yeah.
awesome.
Hmm.
Well, you also kind of answered this question, but
Okay.
do you think at all
Uh
now
huh.
that battle royales have kind of died down
Hmm.
and Overwatch especially is kind of a not a dead game, obviously, still has hundreds of thousands of players, but is not a loved game like it used to be,
Right.
with Overwatch 2 being a huge letdown for fans. Do you
Hmm.
think that if Gigantic were to come out today
Hmm.
and have a team behind it, have updates coming out for it, do you think it would have a chance to have a stable player base and do well? Or do you think it would suffer the same fate?
So if Gigantic were to come out right now again, like a re-release, do you think it would do well? Basically.
Yep.
I think that, like I said, I kind of answered this before. I think it would have the same issues it would start out strong, but then within the next month, it would die off very fast. And I think it's because of either the skill level and understanding of the game, or it's not everybody's cup of tea in general. Um, if there was a crossover, I think if Gearbox would be like, "Hey, we're gonna re-release Battleborn, but we're also gonna have Gigantic, and we're gonna have the game modes of both intertwined." I don't know how the hell that would
Oh
work.
my god.
That would be weird. But if they were to do some sort of like crossover, um, I think that would be interesting and bring a lot of people to the table and be like, "Hey, we should check out this game." Um, but in reality, they would have to spend years and years remaking Gigantic to be where it needs to be, whether that's keeping it in Unreal Engine 3 or updating it to the newest engine, which I doubt. But I think there would be way too much work to go into it, and I don't think Gearbox is willing to take that chance since they have ownership of it now.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't think it has a chance. Even though I know the battle royale genre is dying, which it is, it's slowly just starting to fall off. I don't know what's next in terms of gaming, but I don't think MOBAs are going to be the thing that takes back gaming or redefines gaming in 2024 or
Mm.
whatever the next couple years look like. Um, so it's unfortunate. I want it to come back. I would probably still play it, but I think that's gonna be the nail in the coffin for the game that we loved five,
Yeah.
6 years ago. Yeah, I know.
Well, as kind of a final question,
Sure.
um, is there anything cool that you're working on lately? Is there anything cool you're up to?
I got married. I came back from Japan. Going back to school.
Nice.
Going back for Japanese.
Oh, cool.
So gonna try to go into translation. So that's gonna be awesome. So those are the main things. Yeah. So
That's awesome, man.
after stopping streaming, I sort of went back to school and focused on myself, got a degree, and now I'm going to grad school to keep focusing on that degree.
Wow.
So that's the plan. So if it wasn't for Gigantic dying, I wouldn't be here right now. I'm kidding.
I think that's true for all of us.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It kind of needed to be the sacrifice for us to move on with our lives.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, what? Just out of curiosity for me,
Sure.
what's learning Japanese like and going to school for it? Because I've always heard it's the most difficult language to learn, especially for English speakers.
It is. It's so different. The layout of sentences are completely opposite of what English is. Learning the different characters compared to, English is just completely different. All the Chinese characters, kanji is just mind-boggling for someone who learned English. It's just so it's really difficult. It takes a lot of time. Obviously, it takes more time than like German or French,
Mm,
just because it's so different from what we're used to.
yeah.
But learning it in an academic setting, it has its own challenges. But I can see why people say that it's one of the hardest languages to learn alongside Chinese. It's
Mm.
very, very tough to learn. So
Well, good luck to you. Thanks for having this conversation with me. I appreciate
thanks.
it.
It was fun, Ike. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. This is a blast.
Hell yeah.